Welcome to the Sci-Fi Rancher story. Here you find the best HFY story written by human. Listen the story. If you like it, subscribe the channel.
Ura's body was fragile, trembling with a cold Kion couldn't fathom her alien. Physiology was delicate yet intricate, each marking on her skin pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Kion wondered if she was dying. The thought unsettled him, compelling him to act swiftly. He lit his small oil lamp, the glow casting soft shadows against the curved walls of the igloo. The warmth of the space intensified, but Illyra remained unresponsive, her breath shallow. Kion searched for more blank ETS, layering them over her. Still her chill persisted. A frost that seemed to seep from her being. Kion crouched beside her, his mind racing. His survival instincts had served him well in the wilderness, but this caring for a being from the stars was beyond his experience. He spoke to her softly, his voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling in his mind. "Stay with me, Illyra," he murmured. "I don't know what you need, but I'll figure it out. Just pet on." She stirred faintly at the sound of her name, her eyes fluttering open. For the briefest moment, Kion's heart leaped as her gaze met his warmth. She whispered the word, barely audible. Kion hesitated for only a second before making a decision. He slid under the blankets beside her, pulling her icy form against his chest. Her skin was colder than the air outside, and he shivered involuntarily, but slowly he felt her body begin to absorb his warmth, her trembling easing slightly. "I've got you," he said, his voice firm. "You're safe." Breathing steadied her body, relaxing in his embrace. As the hours passed, Kion held her close, his mind wandering to questions he couldn't yet ask. Who was she? Why had her people come here? Was she alone? Eventually her eyes opened again, this time with more clarity. She studied him intently, her expression a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You saved me," she said, her voice like a breeze over frozen water. Kion offered a small smile. "I couldn't let you freeze out." Their lips curved into a faint smile, the gesture transforming her alien beauty into something achingly human. "Your kindness, it is rare among many." "Thank you." Her words, though simple, carried a depth that struck Kion to his core. He realized then that this encounter was more than a chance meeting. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. As the storm outside raged on, they remained cocooned in the warmth of the igloo, two beings from different worlds, united by a shared need to survive. The questions that had plagued Kion earlier faded into the background, replaced by a singular, undeniable truth. Illyra was here with him, and that was all that mattered. The hours passed slowly, the wind outside howling like a chorus of restless spirits inside the igloo. Time seemed suspended. Elle's breathing grew steadier, her faintly glowing skin now carrying a touch of warmth. From Kion's efforts, he couldn't stop himself from marveling at her up close. Her features were breathtaking in their uniqueness. The patterns on her skin weren't merely decorative. They seemed alive, faintly pulsating like veins of light coursing through her body. Her hair, a cascade of shimmering silver blue strands, spilled across the fur-lined bedding like liquid moonlight. Her eyes, though heavy with exhaustion, remained sharp and alert. They bore a depth that spoke of wisdom far beyond anything Kion had encountered. "Why help me?" Illyra finally asked, her voice soft but tinged with curiosity. Kion hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "You were in trouble." "Anyone would have done the same." She tilted her head slightly as though processing his answer. "Not anyone," she said slowly. "Fear rules many." Her words struck him. She was right. The unknown often bred fear, and many might have turned away. Kion had lived alone for so long that he learned to embrace the unpredictable, to see the unfamiliar not as a threat, but as a mystery to be understood. "You're right," he admitted, "but I'm not afraid of you." Her lips curved into a faint smile, and for the first time Kion noticed how her emotions seemed to ripple across her markings. The patterns glowed a little brighter, the light dancing like a gentle tide. "Fearless," she murmured, her voice carrying a note of admiration. Kion chuckled, though the sound was subdued. "Not fearless, just curious." "You're not exactly what I expected to find out here." Er's expression softened. "And you not what I expected." Your warmth She hesitated as if searching for the right words. It's different, not just temperature, something more. Her words stirred something within him, a sense of connection that defied logic. He didn't fully understand her, but he felt the weight of her gratitude and the vulnerability she shared in letting him help her. Are there others? He asked, his voice careful. Like you? She closed her eyes for a moment, as if in pain. My ship, my people gone. I am alone. The raw emotion in her voice twisted Kian's heart. He couldn't imagine the isolation. She must feel the grief of being separated from her kind. You're not alone anymore, he said gently. Her eyes opened, locking onto his. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile yet profound understanding. The storm outside finally began to ease, the wind dying down to a whisper. Ilara stirred, attempting to sit up. Kian moved to support her, his hands gentle but firm. Easy, he said. You're still recovering. I am stronger now, she replied, her voice steadier. Your care has healed me more than I expected. Kian raised an eyebrow. How? She placed a hand over her chest, where the markings on her skin glowed faintly. We, my kind, we adapt. Your warmth, your energy, it's compatible with mine. Kian couldn't hide his amazement. So, you're adapting to Earth? Ilara nodded, though her expression remained solemn. But it takes time, and not all environments or beings are as welcoming as you. The weight of her words lingered between them. Kian realized the magnitude of what she'd endured, an alien stranded in an unforgiving world, relying on the compassion of a stranger to survive. Well, he said, trying to lighten the mood, I guess this igloo isn't so bad after all. Elk laugh was soft, melodic. It is warm, and you are kind. The simplicity of her words carried undeniable sincerity. Kian felt his cheeks flush, not from the cold, but from something else entirely, as the first hints of dawn painted the horizon. Ilara stood shakily, her movements graceful despite her exhaustion. She gazed at the world outside, her crystalline eyes reflecting the faint light. This place, she began, her voice trailing off. Kian joined her, standing at her side. It's harsh but beautiful, like you. Ilara turned to him, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his hand. Thank you, Kian, she said softly, for everything. Her touch sent a ripple of warmth through him, a sensation unlike anything he'd ever felt. It wasn't just physical, it was a connection, a blending of their worlds in that single moment. You're welcome, he said, his voice equally soft as the light grew stronger, casting the icy landscape in shades of gold and silver. Kian realized that his life would never be the same. This encounter, this extraordinary being, had changed everything, and somehow he knew that their journey together was only beginning. The Arctic tundra stretched endlessly before them, a pristine expanse of ice and snow glistening under the rising sun. Ilara stood at the igloo threshold, her ethereal form bathed in the golden light. Her opalescent skin glimmered, and her markings, now brighter and more defined, seemed to echo her growing strength. Kian watched her, a mix of awe and curiosity swelling within him. He couldn't help but notice how her presence softened the harshness of their surroundings. She was a living contradiction, a being so delicate and otherworldly, yet resilient enough to survive a crash and adapt to this frozen wasteland. You've changed, he said, his voice low. Ilara turned to him, her crystalline eyes narrowing slightly in thought. Yes, she replied, your warmth, this environment, it reshapes me slowly but surely. Kian stepped closer, intrigued. What do you mean? How are you adapting? Ilara hesitated, as if weighing how much she should share. Finally, she spoke, her voice measured. My kind are designed to adapt. We absorb energy, knowledge, even emotions, and integrate them. It allows us to survive in places unlike our home. But her voice faltered, and her gaze shifted to the icy horizon. It is not always painless. There are losses. Kian frowned, concern flickering in his chest. What kind of losses? Ilara turned back to him, her expression tinged with sadness. Pieces of ourselves, memory, sometimes even our essence. The weight of her words hung in the air, and Kian struggled to find a response. He couldn't fathom the complexity of her existence or the sacrifices she'd endured. I'm sorry, he said finally. If I'd known you've given me something I thought I'd lost, she interrupted, her voice soft but firm. Connection, it's worth any price. Over the following days, Kian and Ilara began to establish a rhythm. She explored the area, Cautiously, her curiosity insatiable, every detail of the world fascinated her. The crunch of snow, underfoot the shimmering frost on tree branches, the subtle variations of light during the day. Khan introduced her to his tools and survival gear, explaining their purpose. And use Elle's intellect shone as she grasped the concepts quickly, often offering insights of her own use. Fire for warmth and cooking, she observed one evening, as they sat by the small wood stove Kian had built into the igloo. But it is also destructive, Kian nodded. It's both, depends on how you use it. Ura's markings pulsed softly like emotions, she said, unblinked, caught off guard by her insight. Yeah, he admitted, I guess that's true. Her gaze lingered on him, her expression unreadable. You've shown me kindness without fear, she said. That is rare among the beings we've studied. Kian tilted his head. You've studied humans? Illyra nodded from afar. We watched, learned, but we rarely interact. Why not? He asked. She hesitated, her eyes flickering with a mix of emotions. Fear your kind, they fear the unknown, and we fear what that fear might bring. Her words stung, but Kian couldn't deny their truth. Humanity's history was riddled with fear-driven violence, especially toward what it didn't understand. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Weck, not all like that. Expression softened. No, you're not. One evening, as the northern lights danced across the sky, Era revealed more of her story. She spoke of her home world, a place of breathtaking beauty and boundless knowledge. Her people, she explained, lived in harmony with their environment, their society built on understanding and coexistence. We sought to explore, she said, her voice tinged with longing to learn from other worlds. But we underestimated the chaos of space. My ship, we encountered something, an anomaly. It pulled us off course. She paused, her eyes glistening with tears. I don't know if any of them survived. Kian reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. You survived, he said, and maybe they did too. We'll find out. Her gaze met his, a flicker of hope igniting in her crystalline eyes. You would help me, of course, he replied without hesitation. We'll figure it out together. The next morning they began work on her damaged pod. Kian marveled at the technology, a seamless blend of organic and mechanical components. Illyra explained its functions. As they worked side by side, her knowledge weaving seamlessly with his practical ingenuity. It's alive, Kian remarked, running his hand over the pod's surface, which pulsed faintly under his touch. Illyra nodded. In a way, it responds to energy and intention, but it is fragile now. They spent hours repairing the pod, their efforts punctuated by moments of shared laughter and quiet understanding. Kian was struck by how easily they worked together, their differences complementing rather than clashing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of blue and silver, Illyra turned to Kian. You are remarkable, she said softly. Kian chuckled, brushing a hand through his hair. I'm just a guy in the middle of nowhere. Her expression grew serious. No, you are more than that. You see what others do not. You accept without fear. The sincerity in her voice left Kian momentarily speechless. For the first time he realized how much her words meant to him, how deeply her presence had begun to affect him. As the northern lights flared above them, Illyra reached out her fingers, brushing his cheek. Thank you, Kian, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. For being you in that moment under the vast expanse of the Arctic sky. Their connection deepened, unspoken but undeniable. Two beings from different worlds, bound by an extraordinary chance encounter, now faced the unknown together. The days passed with an almost dreamlike rhythm. Each morning brought new challenges as Kian and Illyra worked tirelessly on her damaged pod, but the quiet shared moments in between felt just as significant. Their connection deepened in ways neither could have anticipated, a bond born of mutual trust and curiosity. Illyra adapted quickly to her surroundings. Her alien physiology continued to shift subtly, her glowing markings now steady and vibrant, no longer the erratic pulses they had been when she first arrived. She began to move with greater confidence, her curiosity about Earth driving her to explore beyond the igloo immediate vicinity. Kian watched her with a mix of admiration and protectiveness. He couldn't help but marvel at her resilience, the way she embraced the harshness of his world With grace and determination one particularly frigid evening, they huddled together near the small stove sharing warmth as they often did. The conversation turned, as it often did, to questions about their respective worlds. "Do you miss it?" Kian asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Illyria glanced at him, her crystalline eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "My home," he nodded. "Every moment," she admitted, her voice carrying a wistful melody. "It's more than a place. It's a connection, a part of who we are. Without it, we feel incomplete." Kian frowned, the weight of her words settling over him. "I can't imagine what that's like to lose something so fundamental." Illyria reached out her fingers, brushing his hand. "But your world has its own beauty," she said softly, "and it's people like you. They remind me that there's always hope, even in the unknown." Kian looked at her, his heart tightening in a way he couldn't quite explain. "You don't give yourself enough credit. You've been through so much, and you're still standing." Illyria smiled, the glow of her markings softening. "And you've shown me that even in the harshest places there is warmth." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotion, the tension both exhilarating and terrifying. Kian broke the silence first, his voice low. "You've changed things, Illyria. My life, this place. Everything feels different now." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Different can be beautiful," she said, her voice a whisper. Before he could respond, she leaned closer, her hand moving to his cheek. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it sent a shiver down his spine. "I've never felt this way," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Not in all my journeys." Kian swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "Neither have I." Her lips curved into a small smile, and she closed the remaining distance between them. Their first kiss was tentative, a meeting of two worlds in the most intimate way possible. Her lips were cool against his, but they warmed quickly, as if responding to his touch. Time seemed to freeze as the kiss deepened, their emotions flowing freely, unburdened by the barriers of language or species. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, their faces inches apart. "I don't know where this is going," Ken said, his voice barely audible. "But I don't want it to stop." Illyria's markings glowed brightly, her smile radiant. "Neither do I." The following days were filled with a new kind of energy. Their work on the pod continued, but there was a lightness to their interactions, a sense of joy that hadn't been there before. Er's laughter, soft and melodic, became a regular part of Kian's days, and he found himself seeking out reasons to make her smile. One afternoon, as they worked to repair a particularly damaged section of the pod, Illyria paused and looked at him thoughtfully. "You're remarkable, Kian," she said, her tone serious. He blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" She gestured around them. "This place, this life. It's not easy, but you've built something here. You've survived, thrived, even in a world that would challenge anyone." Kian shrugged, a little embarrassed by her praise. "You do what you have to know," Illyria said firmly. "You do more than that. You create, you give. That's what makes you different." Her words struck a chord deep within him, and for a moment he couldn't find a response. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Maybe I just needed someone to remind me of what's worth fighting for," he said finally. Her expression softened, and she squeezed his hand in return. "Then let's keep fighting together." Their work on the pod began to yield results. Technology, while complex, responded well to Kian's practical ingenuity. Slowly but surely they managed to restore partial functionality to the pod systems. One evening, as they sat outside under the shimmering auroras, Illyria turned to him with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "The pod's beacon, it's working," she said. "It's weak, but it's sending a signal." Kian's heart skipped a beat. "So they'll come for you?" She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps, but it may take time." And even then her voice trailed off, the unspoken implications heavy in the air. Kian didn't press her, sensing her inner conflict. "No matter what happens," he said quietly, "you're not alone." Illyria smiled, her markings glowing softly. "I know. I'm under the vast expanse of the Arctic sky." They sat in companionable silence, their hands entwined. For now, they were content to let the future wait. The repaired beacon pulsed softly inside Er's pod, a faint rhythmic signal echoing into the void. Kian and Illyria stood together in the glow of the device. "The moment, bittersweet. This changes Everything, doesn't it? Kian asked, his voice quiet. Elora nodded her markings, shimmering faintly. If my people hear it, they will come, but I don't know when or what will follow. Her gaze shifted to him, her expression filled with emotion. I fear what they will think of this place, and of you. Kian frowned, his chest tightening. Why? I've done nothing wrong. It's not about right or wrong, she said, stepping closer. It's about fear of the unknown, of change. Some of them may not understand what we've become. Her words hung in the air, their weight undeniable. Kian reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers, then will face them together, no matter what's. Lips curved into a soft smile. You are so certain, Kian. It's one of the things I admire most about you. Not certain, he admitted, just determined. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Illyro worked tirelessly to strengthen the beacon signal, while Kian ensured their supplies were stocked, and the Igloo reinforced. The Arctic winds grew harsher as winter deepened, but they faced each challenge side by side. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Kian found Illyr sitting by the small stove, her expression distant. Penny, for your thoughts? He asked, settling beside her. She tilted her head, curiosity flickering across her features. A penny? Kian chuckled. It's an old saying. It means I want to know what's on your mind. Her expression softened, and she reached for his hand. You, she said simply. Kian blinked, taken aback by her honesty. Me? Yes, she said, her mockings glowing faintly. I think about what will happen when my people come, what they will say, what they might do. She hesitated, her grip on his hand tightening. And I think about you, what will happen to us. Kian's heart ached at the vulnerability in her voice. He placed a hand over hers, his touch firm and reassuring. Weck, figure it out, he said. No matter what comes, I'm not letting go of this of us. Her eyes shimmered, and she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. You give me strength, Kian, she whispered, and you remind me what's worth fighting for, he replied. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew stronger. They spent hours talking, sharing stories of their lives and dreams. Kian told Illyr about his childhood, his decision to live in the wilderness, and the peace he found in solitude. Until now, Illyr in turn spoke of her people's quest for knowledge and the beauty of her homeworld. She described crystalline forests that sang in the wind, oceans that shimmered with iridescent light, and skies filled with constellations unfamiliar to Earth. Your world sounds like something out of a dream, Kian said one night as they lay beneath the stars, the auroras dancing overhead. It is beautiful, Illyr admitted, but so is yours. The resilience of life here, the raw, untamed beauty. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. She turned to him, her expression tender. And you, Kian, you are the most extraordinary part of this world. Kian felt his cheeks flush, but he didn't look away. You're not so bad yourself, you know. Her laughter, soft and melodic, filled the air. One crisp morning, Illyr made a discovery that sent a thrill of hope through both of them. The beacon, she said, her voice filled with excitement. The signal, it's been received. Kian's heart leaped. So they're coming, she nodded, her eyes shimmering with a mix of joy and apprehension. Yes, but it could take time. Space travel is not instantaneous. Her smile faltered, and she glanced at him. Are you ready for this? Kian reached for her hand, his expression steady. Are you? Illyr hesitated before nodding. With you, yes. They embraced the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. As the days passed, the anticipation grew. The beacon's signal remained steady, and the knowledge that Earth's people were on their way brought both hope and uncertainty. Kian and Illyr spent their nights under the stars, cherishing each moment, knowing their time alone was drawing to a close. One evening, as they stood together outside the igloo, Illyr turned to Kian. No matter what happened, she said softly, this us, it will always be a part of me. Kian reached for her, his hands framing her face. And you'll always be a part of me, he said. Their kiss was tender, but filled with unspoken promises. The auroras above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if the universe itself recognized the depth of their connection. For now, under the vast expanse of the Arctic sky, they were simply Kian and Illyr, two souls from different worlds, bound by love and the hope of what lay ahead. The day Earth's people arrived dawned cold and clear, the air tinged with an unnatural stillness. Kian stood outside the igloo, the horizon Stretching endlessly before him beside him, Ilara gazed at the sky, her crystalline eyes reflecting both anticipation and unease. "They close," she said, her voice a whisper. "How do you know?" Kaon asked, though he trusted her intuition implicitly. "By now I can feel them," she replied, her glowing markings pulsing. "Feel their energy, it resonates with mine." Kian nodded, his chest heightening, the thought of losing her, of their fragile world together changing, not at him. But he pushed the fear aside, determined to face whatever came. When the ship appeared, it was unlike anything Kian had imagined. A sleek silver vessel emerged from the clouds, its surface shimmering like liquid light. It hovered silently above the tundra before descending with a grace that seemed to defy physics. The air around them thrummed with energy. As the ship landed, Kian glanced at Ilara, whose markings glowed brighter than ever. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her features. Kian reached for her hand. "I'm with you." She looked at him, her crystalline eyes filled with gratitude. Always. The ship's door opened, and 3 figures emerged. They were tall and slender, their forms ethereal and graceful like Urus. Their markings glowed with a similar light, though the patterns were distinct, almost like fingerprints. Ilara stepped forward, her posture calm but respectful. She spoke in her native tongue, the melodic sounds unfamiliar to Kian, but captivating. The tallest of the aliens replied, their tone measured. Kian couldn't understand the words, but he felt the tension in their exchange. After a few moments, Ilara turned to Kian. "They want to know who you are," she said. Kian nodded, stepping forward. "I'm Kian," he said simply. The alien who had spoken regarded him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Their eyes, though similar to hers, lacked the warmth he had come to know. Ilara spoke again, her tone firmer this time. Whatever she said seemed to have an effect. The alien posture relaxed slightly, and they exchanged a few more words before stepping back, as if inviting them onto the ship. Ilara turned to Kian, her expression conflicted. "Ed, they want us to come aboard. They say they need to understand everything before deciding what happens next." Kian met her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Whatever happens, we face it together." She nodded, her markings glowing brighter together. The interior of the ship was as breathtaking as its exterior, smooth luminescent walls pulsed with a soft light, and the air seemed to hum with energy. Kian felt a strange mix of awe and unease as they were into a central chamber. The aliens sat in a semicircle, their expressions inscrutable. Ilara and Kian stood before them, their differences stark in the pristine otherworldly space. One of the aliens spoke, their tone questioning. Ilara responded, her voice calm but passionate. "What are they saying?" Kian whispered. "They're asking about you," she replied. "About us? And what are you telling them?" "The truth," she said, her gaze unwin. "That you saved me, that you showed me kindness and compassion when I was vulnerable, that we are connected in a way they may not understand." Kian's chest tightened, both from the vulnerability in her voice and the weight of what was happening. The questioning continued for what felt like hours. Kian couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the tension in the room. He stayed close to Ilara, his presence a silent show of support. Finally, the tallest alien stood, their markings glowing faintly. They spoke in a tone that seemed both final and conciliatory. "What did they say?" Kian asked. As the alien finished speaking, Ilara turned to him, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. "They've agreed to let me stay for now. They see the value in our connection, though they don't fully understand it." Kian felt a surge of hope, but it was tempered by her tone. But her gaze dropped. "But they will monitor. They are cautious. If they feel this is a risk to our kind or yours, they may intervene." Kian frowned, his hands clenching into fists. "Intervene? How?" Ilara hesitated. "They didn't say, but for now we have their blessing." Kian took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "Then we'll prove them wrong. Will show them that this what we have is worth protecting." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she reached for his hand. "You give me hope, Kian, more than I've ever known." As the ship prepared to leave, Ilara and Kian stood together outside, watching the vessel rise into the sky. The aliens had left them with a sense of uneasy peace, but Kian knew their presence would linger in more ways than one. Ilara turned to him, her expression soft but determined. "This is just the beginning," she said. Kian nodded, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "Then let's face it together under the vast expanse of the Arctic sky." As the stars glittered above, they found solace in each other's embrace. The challenges ahead were uncertain, but their bond was unbreakable. A testament to the power of connection across worlds. Months passed, and the tension that had once defined Kian and Ura's life together began to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding. The aliens who had arrived with Ilir had kept their distance, watching from the shadows as Ilira and Kian continued to live their lives in the wilderness. Their presence was a constant reminder of the fragility of their relationship, but it was also a reminder that they had a shared future to protect. The beacon on Ilir's ship remained active, but it had yet to bring any new visitors. Ilara had grown more attuned to the signals that came and went from the stars, though she no longer seemed as burdened by the uncertainty. For Kian, the days began to blur together in a quiet rhythm. Working on the land, fixing the pod, and spending time with Ilir, their bond had grown into something deeper than he had ever expected. The nights they shared under the stars became moments of peace. He cherished the weight of the unknown, nowhere to be found. Ilara had become more than just an alien visitor to him. She was his partner, his equal, his home. One evening, as the aurora painted the sky in vibrant hues, Kian sat with Ilira beside a crackling fire. Her markings glowed softly in the flickering light, a steady reminder of the otherworldly beauty she carried with her. They had spent the day repairing the pod, and now, as they sat in comfortable silence, the fire cast long shadows across the snow. "I've been thinking," Ire said, breaking the silence. Kian raised an eyebrow, thinking about what. Her gaze turned to the sky, her eyes following the shimmering lights above them, about the stars, about what they mean to us, to our worlds. He watched her, intrigued by the intensity in her voice. "What do they mean to you?" "They've always been a guide," she said softly, "a map to the unknown, to our future." But now she paused, her gaze falling to the ground, as if contemplating something deep within her. "I've come to realize the stars are not just about where we're going, they're about where we've been and where we are." Kian's heart raised, the weight of her words sinking in. "Where we are?" She turned to him, her eyes sparkling in the firelight. "Yes, because right here, right now, is where we belong." The warmth between them felt different now, deeper, more certain. Kian's chest tightened as he took her hand, their fingers intertwining. "I never thought I'd find this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was meant to be alone in this world, in this place. But then you came, and everything changed." Ilira smiled, her expression tender. "I don't belong to the stars, Kian. I belong here with you." The fire crackled between them, the flames dancing as if they too understood the significance of this moment. For the first time, Kian felt a quiet peace settle over him, a peace that had been absent for much of his life. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between their two worlds continued to simmer just beneath the surface. The ship had left, returning to the stars, and though Ur's people had promised to respect their bond, there was always the lingering question of what would come next. But for now, Ilara and Kian had made their choice. They would not allow the uncertainty of the future to define them. Instead, they would live in the present, cherishing what they had. One evening, as they stood together beneath the shimmering sky, Ilara leaned against Kian, her markings glowing brighter than ever. "I used to wonder what it would be like to belong," she said softly, "to have a place that was truly mine. But now I don't wonder anymore." Kian turned to her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You have a place, Ilara. It's with me." Her smile was like the dawn, warm and full of promise. "And you have a place with me." Years passed, and the ship never returned. Ilara and Kian continued to build their life together, a life that spanned two worlds yet was rooted firmly in one. They had no need for the stars to guide them now. They had each other. Kian found peace in the simple things, the sound of Ur's laughter, the warmth of her touch, and the way her markings glowed in the twilight hours. He no longer felt the weight of the unknown bearing down on him. They had created something together that was more powerful than any force in the universe, a love that transcended worlds. And though they were far from the expectations of either of their species, Kian knew that they had found something far more valuable, something no ship or beacon could ever bring. They had found home. As they stood together on the edge of the snow-covered plains, the northern lights swirling above them, Keon pulled Ilera close, his arms around her in a silent promise. Whatever happens, he said, his voice firm, with conviction, we'll face it together. Irk markings shimmered in the cool night air as she pressed her forehead to his. Together, she echoed, and in that moment, with the stars overhead and the wind at their backs, they knew that no matter what the future held, their love was the one constant that would never change. Together, they would write their own story, one that reached far beyond the stars and deeper than either of them had ever imagined. The end.